Our perspectives are influenced by our biases, which affect how we perceive the world. Our background, personal history, values, and even our genetic makeup can shape the way we see and understand the world. While certain biases can assist us in making rapid decisions, others can result in a narrow-minded perspective, faulty judgments, and disagreements with people who have differing viewpoints. Having a neutral mindset involves making an effort to view situations, ideas, and people in an objective manner, free from any biases or personal motives. Identifying our own biases requires self-awareness, while challenging our assumptions requires courage and humility. A neutral mindset embraces various perspectives, prioritizes facts over emotions, and remains receptive to changing views and new information. This book offers a clear and straightforward guide to developing impartiality. It includes self-reflection exercises, analytical techniques, and mindset shifts to help you along the way. This course will help you develop a deeper understanding of different perspectives, identify logical inconsistencies, think critically, and recognize the importance of diverse ways of thinking. By cultivating patience and dedicating time to practice, you can develop an impartial mindset that will greatly benefit you. This mindset will enable you to make better decisions, improve your communication skills, and enhance your ability to relate to others with wisdom and compassion. Lesson 1. Identify and acknowledge your biases. Catherine took great satisfaction in her ability to be fair and unbiased. She tried to be open-minded and offered everyone an equal opportunity. But something happened at work that made her rethink how objective her thinking actually was. The job of adding a new junior associate to Catherine's team fell to her. She invited 4 applicants for in-person interviews after going through dozens of resumes. 2 men and 2 women, some new grads and others with years of experience, made up the eclectic group of contenders. On paper, Catherine thought she couldn't really decide between the candidates. However, as the interviews went on, she noticed that she was gradually being influenced by implicit prejudices that she was unaware she possessed. Catherine instantly felt credible and trusted in Alex, a white male Ivy League graduate. She took his impressive qualifications as a sign of competence, but throughout the interview she found herself examining Jamila, a lady of color from a less respected school, more closely. Then there was Josie, a man who had changed occupations later in life, despite having years of experience in the field. Accusing herself that he might not be as tech-savvy or modern as younger applicants, Catherine caught herself. Furthermore, Catherine was concerned that even with Samantha's great resume, a recent graduate with stellar marks but little practical experience, she would be in over her head. After the last interview, Catherine thought back on her reasoning and saw how her preconceptions of the candidate's talents had been subtly influenced by her biases towards gender, ethnicity, age, and education. Her quick decisions were unfairly skewing the odds in her favor. Taken aback by her own biases, Catherine made the decision to put the hiring process on hold. She looked for materials on identifying and getting rid of unconscious prejudice in hiring. She became knowledgeable about methods such as creating structured behavioral interviews and hiding applicant information. Now that she was conscious of her prejudices, Catherine objectively went over the candidates' documents again, concentrating only on their qualifications and answers. Samantha was ultimately hired by her because of her enthusiasm, ingenuity, and ability to solve problems. When considered objectively, Samantha was the best applicant. Following that encounter, Catherine made a commitment to consistently recognize and consider her own implicit presumptions and biases, in order to assist her staff in identifying blind spots in their decision. She developed diversity training programs. Although difficult to face, Catherine was able to make more equitable hiring and evaluation judgments after she acknowledged her biases. By adopting an impartial mindset and making sure that all candidates had equal opportunity at work, she developed into a stronger leader. Our minds are naturally prone to a variety of cognitive biases, which are consistent patterns of deviation from rational judgment and objective truth. Biases arise from a combination of factors, including our evolutionary history, cultural conditioning, personal experiences, and the limitations of our brain's information processing abilities. Although these mental shortcuts were beneficial in our ancestral past for making rapid decisions in life or death scenarios, they can sometimes misguide us in the present day. This can result in holding on to false beliefs, making unwise choices, and strengthening pre-existing biases. To develop an impartial mindset, it's important to recognize and comprehend our biases. By doing so, we can start to minimize their impact on our thoughts and behaviors. Confirmation bias is a common bias that we all experience. It refers to our tendency to look for, interpret, and remember information that supports our existing beliefs or hypotheses. This bias can be quite sneaky, as it causes us to unknowingly ignore evidence that goes against our beliefs and instead pay attention only to data that confirms our existing worldview. It's a cycle that keeps strengthening our beliefs, even when there's plenty of evidence against them. In order to address confirmation bias, it's important for us to actively search for information and perspectives that may challenge our existing beliefs. We should make a conscious effort to consider alternative explanations and viewpoints with an open mind. There is another bias that can affect our judgment called the availability heuristic. This bias makes us overestimate the likelihood or importance of events or information that are more easily accessible or memorable to us. This can result in us making decisions based on personal stories or striking examples, rather than taking into account the complete range of data and statistical probabilities. Take plane crashes as an example. We might mistakenly believe that they happen more frequently than they actually do, because they get a lot of attention in the media and are more memorable than the countless uneventful flights. In order to address this bias, it is important for us to actively search for comprehensive data sets and take into account base rates and overall probabilities. This approach ensures that we don't solely rely on the examples that are most easily recalled. There is another bias that can affect our impartiality called the anchoring bias. This bias occurs when we rely too much on the first piece of information we receive, known as the anchor, when making decisions or judgments. This anchor has the ability to impact our thoughts and choices, even if it seems unrelated or unimportant. For example, when a seller sets an extremely high price for a product, we might unknowingly base our perception of its value on that initial amount, even if it is clearly unreasonable. In order to address this bias, it is important for us to consistently evaluate the significance and impartiality of the initial anchor and actively adapt our viewpoint as we acquire additional information. Another bias that can hinder our ability to view situations impartially is the fundamental attribution error. This phenomenon describes how we often attribute the actions and behaviors of others to their personal traits or characteristics, while downplaying the impact of external factors or circumstances. Take the scenario of someone cutting us off in traffic. Our initial reaction might be to label them as reckless or inconsiderate, without taking into account the possibility that they may have been distracted or encountered an unexpected obstacle on the road. In order to address this bias, It is important for us to carefully take into account the surrounding circumstances and any external influences that may be influencing someone's actions. We should refrain from making broad assumptions about someone's character based solely on individual incidents. The observer bias is closely linked to the fundamental attribution error. It involves attributing our own behaviors to external circumstances, while attributing the behaviors of others to internal factors or character traits. This bias arises from our tendency to justify our own actions and protect our self-perception, while applying a different set of expectations to others. For instance, when we fail to meet a deadline at work, it's common to attribute it to external factors, such as an unforeseen disruption or conflicting priorities. There's another sneaky bias that can get in the way of being fair and unbiased. It's called the in-group bias, which means we tend to show favoritism to people in our own social groups and treat those outside our group with more negativity or discrimination. This bias stems from our innate instinct to create tight-knit communities and alliances for survival and safety. However, it can result in detrimental stereotyping, prejudice, and discrimination in today's world. In order to address this bias, it is important for us to actively challenge our natural tendency to see things in terms of us versus them. We should make an effort to engage with and understand people from different backgrounds, and consciously make an effort to see people as unique people rather than just members of a group. Another cognitive bias that can impact our decision-making is the sunk cost fallacy. It has the potential to cloud our judgment and make it difficult for us to make unbiased decisions. This concept relates to our inclination to continue with a certain course of action or commitment, even if it has been shown to be unproductive or harmful, solely because we have already dedicated a considerable amount of time, effort, or resources to it. This bias can lead us to continue investing in unproductive endeavors, staying in toxic relationships, or persisting with unsuccessful projects or strategies, all because we are hesitant to let go of our past investments. In order to foster impartiality, it is important for us to be able to identify and overcome the sunk cost fallacy. We should be willing to make the necessary adjustments and change direction when the evidence and circumstances call for it, regardless of any previous commitments or investments we may have made. The halo effect is a cognitive bias that can affect our judgment and make it difficult to view situations and people without bias. This phenomenon occurs when we form a quick judgment about someone or something based on a single trait or characteristic, and then let that initial impression affect how we perceive their other qualities or attributes that may not be related. Take, for instance, when we perceive someone as physically attractive, we tend to automatically assume they possess qualities such as intelligence, success, or kindness, even in the absence of concrete evidence. On the other hand, when we form a negative initial impression of someone, we tend to disregard their positive attributes. In order to counteract the halo effect, it is important for us to make a conscious effort to evaluate each aspect of a person or situation based on its own merits. We should avoid letting a single trait or characteristic influence our overall perception. The gambler's fallacy is a cognitive bias that can cause us to make irrational and unbiased decisions, especially in relation to probability and chance. This bias arises from the incorrect assumption that if an event or outcome has happened multiple times in the past, it becomes less probable to happen again in the future, or the other way around. For instance, if a coin flip has consistently landed on heads multiple times, we might mistakenly believe that the next flip is more likely to be tails. However, it's important to remember that each flip is an independent event with an equal chance of either outcome. In order to foster impartiality, it is important to recognize that previous occurrences do not impact the likelihood of future separate events. We should avoid the urge to make predictions or judgments based on perceived streaks or patterns that are merely coincidental. The framing effect is a cognitive bias that can hinder our ability to make unbiased judgments and decisions. This phenomenon occurs when the way information is presented or framed has a significant impact on our decision-making, even if the underlying facts or data remain unchanged. Take, for instance, the way we perceive a medical treatment. If it is presented as having a 90% survival rate, we tend to have a more positive outlook compared to when it is described as having a 10% mortality rate, even if the actual statistical outcomes are the same. In order to overcome the framing effect, it is important to consciously look beyond the surface level presentation of information and instead focus on the objective facts and data that are at the core of any situation or decision. The bias blind spot is a type of bias that can hinder our ability to recognize and address our other cognitive biases. This phenomenon highlights how people often acknowledge the influence of biases on other people's judgment and decision-making, but fail to recognize how their own thoughts and actions are also affected by these biases. Try to recognize that we may not always be as objective and rational as we think. Our minds can be influenced by cognitive distortions which can affect our perception of reality. In order to develop a fair perspective, it is important to always be aware and challenge our own assumptions, beliefs, and thinking patterns. We should acknowledge that we are all susceptible to cognitive biases, regardless of how self-aware or objective we think we are. Lesson 2. Empathize and see things from other perspectives. Many times, we tend to see people who have different beliefs, backgrounds, or life experiences as separate from ourselves, without acknowledging our shared humanity and the value of their individual viewpoints. Developing an impartial mindset involves moving beyond a mindset of division and actively working to empathize with and comprehend perspectives that may be different from our own. Expanding our perspective beyond our own limited viewpoint allows us to grasp the intricacies of the difficult problems and obstacles we encounter. Empathy is rooted in the understanding that everyone's reality is subjective. Each person's thoughts, feelings, and perceptions are influenced by their own set of experiences, values, and brain functioning. Different people may interpret what we consider to be a clear truth or logical conclusion in various ways, depending on their unique life experiences and personal circumstances. By making an effort to comprehend these various viewpoints, we not only acquire valuable insights and expand our own perspective, but we also encourage greater mutual understanding, respect, and collaboration among diverse groups and people. A helpful technique for developing empathy and gaining new perspectives is to actively put ourselves in someone else's shoes. This requires intentionally putting aside our own assumptions and prejudices, and actively trying to see a situation or problem from someone else's perspective, taking into account their experiences, beliefs, and emotions. We need to set aside our judgments and approach their perspective with curiosity, openness, and a genuine desire to understand their unique frame of reference, instead of immediately dismissing or invalidating it. Active listening is crucial for developing empathy and gaining new perspectives. This requires more than just listening to someone's words, but making a genuine effort to understand the thoughts, emotions, and intentions behind what they are saying. It involves asking questions to clarify, summarizing what we understand to make sure we're on the same page, and fostering a supportive environment where people can freely be themselves without worrying about being judged or ignored. It is important to consider different viewpoints and expose ourselves to various perspectives in order to develop a fair and impartial mindset. This involves actively seeking and engaging with people, communities, and sources of information that may challenge our current beliefs and assumptions. It means avoiding the tendency to only surround ourselves with like-minded people and echo chambers that simply reinforce our existing worldviews. It requires a willingness to have our strongly held beliefs questioned and challenged, and to be open to revising or even abandoning those beliefs when presented with convincing evidence or logical arguments. While it is important to develop empathy and consider other perspectives, it is equally important to hold on to our own values, principles, and personal truths. We can maintain our core beliefs and ethical foundations while also making an effort to understand and respect differing perspectives. The aim is not to accept or approve every viewpoint we come across, but instead to approach different perspectives with an open mind and a willingness to consider their potential validity or merit, even if we ultimately choose to respectfully disagree. Developing empathy and gaining different perspectives also involves challenging and overcoming our own biases and inclinations towards tribalism. As humans, we naturally tend to form alliances with people who are similar to us, while being cautious or even hostile towards those who are different. It can be challenging to break free from the mindset of dividing people into opposing groups. But it is crucial if we want to create a fair, equal, and peaceful society. We should strive to look beyond surface-level disparities in appearance, culture, or beliefs, and acknowledge the common aspirations, anxieties, and basic human encounters that bind us together. Moreover, cultivating empathy and the ability to see things from others' perspectives is not solely an intellectual endeavor. It also necessitates emotional intelligence and self-awareness. It's important for us to be able to identify and handle our emotional triggers and immediate responses when faced with perspectives or beliefs that differ from our own. When our deeply held convictions are challenged, it's common to react defensively or withdraw completely. However, if we work on developing emotional resilience and self-regulation, we can handle these situations of cognitive dissonance with more calmness and a willingness to learn, instead of responding with anger or defensiveness. It's worth noting that empathy and perspective taking can sometimes be challenging or uncomfortable. Understanding and validating viewpoints that are radically different from our own can be emotionally and intellectually challenging. It necessitates being open, humble, and ready to challenge deeply rooted beliefs and biases that we may not even be fully conscious of. At times, it can be challenging to understand or connect with others, especially when their perspectives or beliefs are deeply troubling to us. It is important to uphold our ethical boundaries and moral foundations, while also seeking to comprehend the reasons behind these differing viewpoints. It's worth noting that empathy and perspective taking may not be suitable or desired in all situations. Some ideologies or belief systems clash with values like empathy, compassion, and respect for human dignity. These ideologies are based on hatred, bigotry, or the deliberate oppression or dehumanization of others. In these situations, it might be more effective to firmly reject and condemn these perspectives instead of trying to find common ground or validation. It's important to handle these situations with wisdom and discernment, and to differentiate between viewpoints that should be respected and considered, and those that go against empathy and human rights. Despite apparent disagreements or strong beliefs, empathy and perspective taking can be effective in promoting understanding, dialogue, and potential solutions or coexistence. By making an effort to understand the reasons, fears, and historical backgrounds that have influenced different perspectives, we can improve our ability to identify common ground or shared objectives, even if our individual beliefs or approaches vary. In addition, when we approach these divides with empathy and a sincere desire to understand, rather than passing judgment or condemning, we increase the chances of fostering open communication and creating opportunities for mutual learning and growth. Developing empathy and the skill to view things from different angles is a continuous process rather than a final goal. Consistent practice, introspection, and a willingness to question our own assumptions and biases are necessary. By adopting this perspective, we can enhance our comprehension of the diverse range of human experiences. Lesson 3. Challenge your own assumptions. To develop impartiality, it is important to regularly question our own assumptions, which can be quite difficult. Our assumptions are the beliefs, judgments, and preconceptions that shape our perception of reality, often without us realizing it. They function as transparent lenses that shape our perception of the world, selectively modifying and distorting information to align with our pre-existing perspectives and convictions. If we don't address these assumptions, they can lead us to confirmation bias, closed-mindedness, and an inability to see beyond our own perspectives. Assumptions are shaped by various factors, such as our cultural background, personal experiences, education, and even our innate biological tendencies. Since childhood, we are taught certain beliefs and values that become an integral part of who we are. As we go through life, we gather a lot of experiences that strengthen our assumptions. We tend to focus on information that supports our existing beliefs and ignore anything that contradicts them. Our assumptions can have a sneaky influence on us, working behind the scenes to shape our thoughts and behaviors without our awareness. Despite our efforts to be rational and open-minded, we often hold on to deeply ingrained assumptions that greatly impact our decision-making and perspectives. We can start addressing these hidden biases and blind spots by making a conscious effort and engaging in self-reflection. Embracing discomfort and cognitive dissonance is necessary to challenge our assumptions. It involves actively searching for information and perspectives that challenge our current beliefs, and being willing to revise or let go of deeply held convictions when presented with strong evidence or logical arguments. This process may be unsettling and even threatening to our sense of identity, as it challenges us to consider that the beliefs and values we have held onto for a long time may be flawed or incomplete. Engaging in active questioning and Socratic dialogue can be a powerful technique for challenging our assumptions. This requires asking thought-provoking questions that question the reasoning and foundations of our beliefs and thoroughly analyzing and examining our assumptions. It involves being open to playing the role of the devil's advocate, temporarily putting aside our own beliefs and arguing from the opposite perspective to thoroughly test the validity and coherence of our convictions. A helpful approach is to actively look for different viewpoints and engage with perspectives that are different from our own. One way to broaden our perspectives is by exploring different sources of information, such as books, articles, or scholarly works. Engaging in respectful debates or discussions with people who have different beliefs can also be enlightening. Additionally, educational or travel opportunities that expose us to new cultures and ways of thinking can help us expand our understanding. By exploring different viewpoints, we can broaden our understanding and gain new insights. This can also help us question and reevaluate our own beliefs and assumptions. Additionally, it's important to develop a mindset of being open to different perspectives and willing to acknowledge when we may be mistaken. Many times, we hold on to our assumptions and beliefs firmly, without considering the chance that our understanding of the world might be limited or incorrect. Nevertheless, achieving true impartiality necessitates acknowledging the inherent constraints of our understanding and being receptive to modifying our convictions when confronted with fresh data or persuasive counterarguments. However, it is important to note that questioning our assumptions does not imply completely disregarding our beliefs or adopting a standpoint of moral relativism. We should continue to uphold our fundamental ethical principles and values, while also being receptive to further developing our comprehension of how to apply those principles in intricate, real-life scenarios. The aim is not to just dismiss our beliefs and assumptions, but instead to continuously examine and modify them. This ensures that our convictions are based on logical reasoning, solid evidence, and a profound regard for human rights and dignity. It's crucial to understand that questioning our assumptions is something we should continuously do, rather than just a one-time occurrence. As we navigate through life and come across different experiences and perspectives, it's important to regularly reassess and challenge the beliefs and assumptions that shape our thoughts and actions. This involves a dedication to continuous learning, introspection, and a readiness to accept ambiguity and personal development, even if it means releasing long-held beliefs that once offered solace or certainty. Moreover, questioning our assumptions is not only something we do individually, but it is also a group effort that involves having open discussions, respectful conversations, and a genuine willingness to consider different perspectives. By fostering an environment that encourages respectful and open discussions, we not only question our own beliefs, but also contribute to a wider culture of analytical thinking, curiosity, and the growth of human knowledge and comprehension. It's worth nothing that questioning our assumptions can be a deeply emotional and sometimes difficult process. Our beliefs and assumptions are closely connected to our sense of identity, our feeling of belonging, and our comprehension of our place in the world. Coming face to face with the idea that these strongly held beliefs might be flawed or incomplete can evoke emotions like sadness, frustration, or even a sense of questioning one's existence. It's important to approach this process with understanding, kindness, and an awareness that our beliefs and assumptions have psychological and social significance, even if they may turn out to be incorrect or incomplete. Challenging our assumptions doesn't mean reaching a state of absolute objectivity or flawless impartiality. It's important to develop a mindset that values humility, curiosity, and a constant desire to reassess and improve our understanding of the world. By adopting this practice, we can enhance our decision-making skills and contribute to the pursuit of knowledge and progress in understanding human experience. This journey demands bravery, perseverance, and a dedication to continuous personal development. However, it holds the potential to enhance our lives, fortify our communities, and propel us towards a fairer, more inclusive, and harmonious society. Lesson 4. Keeping an open mind and continuously learning. Cultivating an impartial mindset requires the capacity to maintain an open mind and value lifelong learning. Many times, we find ourselves stuck in a cycle of intellectual stagnation, holding on to familiar beliefs and perspectives without being open to new information or ideas that may challenge our current worldviews. Nevertheless, achieving true impartiality necessitates a continuous willingness to challenge our assumptions, actively seek diverse perspectives, and be open to revising or discarding deeply ingrained beliefs when presented with compelling evidence or reasoned arguments. Understanding the importance of keeping an open mind involves recognizing the limitations of our own knowledge and experiences. Our understanding of the world is influenced by our individual circumstances, cultural upbringing, and personal biases, regardless of our education or travel experiences, When we humbly accept that our perspectives are limited, we open ourselves up to new ideas and opportunities for growth. This allows us to learn and gain a deeper understanding of the world around us. To truly maintain an open mind, we must make a deliberate choice to resist confirmation bias. This bias is our natural inclination to seek information that supports our existing beliefs and ignore evidence that contradicts them. This cognitive bias can contribute to the formation of echo chambers and the reinforcement of our pre-existing assumptions, which can result in dogmatism and closed-mindedness. In order to address this inclination, it is important for us to actively pursue a range of perspectives, engage with viewpoints that may challenge our own, and approach new information with curiosity and an open mind, rather than being defensive or dismissive. Learning consistently is a great way to keep an open mind and fuel intellectual growth. It helps us expand our knowledge and understanding. In today's ever-evolving world, where new discoveries, technologies, and global shifts are constantly shaping human knowledge, it is crucial to embrace lifelong learning. This commitment allows us to stay informed about emerging trends, ideas, and perspectives that can enhance our understanding of the world. Another effective way to continue learning is by engaging in active questioning and Socratic dialogue. This requires asking thought-provoking questions that question the fundamental assumptions and foundations of our beliefs, participating in respectful debates and discussions, and thoroughly examining and scrutinizing our convictions. Actively seeking out counter-arguments and alternative viewpoints helps us gain a deeper understanding of complex issues and allows us to identify blind spots and limitations in our own thinking. It is important to emphasize the value of continuous learning and having a growth mindset. This mindset involves believing that our abilities and knowledge can be improved through hard work and a positive attitude towards challenges and setbacks. This mindset encourages a genuine passion for learning and acknowledges that being curious and open-minded are ongoing journeys, not final destinations. To truly keep an open mind and keep learning, it's important to push ourselves beyond our comfort zones and actively seek out experiences that introduce us to different perspectives and ways of thinking. One way to achieve this is by participating in cultural immersion experiences, exploring new educational opportunities, or actively seeking out interactions with people and communities that have different backgrounds, beliefs, and life experiences. Expanding our frame of reference and being open to new ideas and worldviews can help us gain a deeper understanding and challenge our assumptions and biases in meaningful ways. It's crucial to understand that being open-minded and committed to lifelong learning doesn't require giving up all convictions or adopting moral relativism. We should continue to uphold our core ethical principles and values, while also being receptive to improving our understanding of how to apply those principles in complex, real-world situations. The aim is not to completely dismiss our beliefs and convictions, but instead to continuously examine, revise, and improve them in light of new information and insights. Having a receptive attitude and a commitment to ongoing growth necessitate emotional intelligence and self-awareness. It's important for us to be able to identify and handle our emotional triggers and defensive reactions when faced with ideas or viewpoints that challenge our strongly held beliefs or worldviews. Approaching moments of cognitive dissonance with curiosity, humility, and a willingness to engage and learn can help prevent the tendency to lash out or shut down. Furthermore, It is important to recognize that keeping an open mind and embracing ongoing learning can sometimes be difficult and even uncomfortable. Encountering new information or perspectives that challenge our current beliefs can cause feelings of uncertainty, confusion, or even existential questioning. It's important to approach this process with kindness towards yourself. The ability to bounce back and an understanding that personal growth can sometimes be challenging. Although there may be difficulties, the benefits of maintaining a receptive mindset and constantly seeking knowledge are significant. By staying open to fresh ideas and different viewpoints, we can enhance our grasp of the world and develop more empathy, intellectual adaptability, and the skill to handle intricate situations with insight and sagacity. In addition, by prioritizing lifelong learning, we can stay up to date with new trends, technologies, and global changes. This helps us maintain a relevant and meaningful understanding. Lesson 5. Reflect on your thoughts, actions, and decisions. We must deliberately make time and space for regular self-reflection if we are to genuinely develop an impartial mindset that is based on self-awareness, intentionality, and a greater understanding of our own biases and blind spots. At its core, reflecting on our thoughts, actions, and choices means taking a break from the constant motion of everyday life and examining ourselves honestly. It means looking at our beliefs, values, and mental patterns that drive our behavior in a critical but caring way. It also means questioning the assumptions and biases that may be affecting how we see things and make decisions without us being aware of it. Writing in a journal or doing contemplative writing on a daily basis is a powerful way to think about yourself. When we set aside time to write or type, we give ourselves permission to explore our deepest feelings, thoughts, and experiences without filtering or criticizing them. This practice can help us see patterns, biases, and blind spots that we might not have been aware of that are affecting our thoughts and actions in ways we hadn't fully understood. Meditation or mindfulness techniques are another helpful way to think about yourself. By practicing being aware of the present moment and observing our thoughts and feelings without judgment, we can learn a lot about how our minds work and the mental processes that affect how we see things and make choices. This increased knowledge of ourselves can help us find and question deeply held beliefs or mental distortions that might be stopping us from seeing things objectively. In addition to thinking about things on our own, it can be very helpful to get feedback and different points of view from people we trust and admire. To do this, you might need to have open and honest talks with close friends, family, mentors, or even professional therapists or coaches. By asking others to look at our thoughts, actions, and decisions from a different point of view, we can find biases and blind spots that we might not have seen ourselves. We can also learn more about how other people see our behavior and choices. Thinking about the choices and acts we've made in the past is also an important part of this practice. By looking back, we can see the beliefs, assumptions, and ways of thinking that led us to make the decisions we did. This helps us figure out if those choices were really based on good reasoning, fair judgment, and a full understanding of all the factors and points of view that were important. It's important to remember, though, that self-reflection is more than just criticizing or dwelling on yourself. It's important to be honest about our mistakes, biases, and growth areas, but we need to do this with self-compassion, curiosity, and a real desire to grow and get better. Being hard on ourselves or wallowing in self-blame is not helpful and can make us more resistant to change and defensive habits. Additionally, self-reflection is not a one-time thing. It's a habit that we need to develop over time and make a part of our everyday lives. As we go through new situations, challenges, and choices, we need to keep stopping to look at our thoughts, what drives us, and how we make choices. If our values and commitment to fairness don't match up with our current approach, we need to make changes. Regular self-reflection is very helpful because it can help us recognize and fight our confirmation biases. A confirmation bias is when we look for and value information that supports what we already believe and ignore or downplay proof that goes against what we think. By shedding light on this unconscious process, we make it possible to actively seek out different points of view, question our views and assumptions, and stay open to changing our minds when we come across compelling new information or insights. Self-reflection can also help you become more emotionally intelligent and better able to control your emotions. By becoming more aware of our own emotional triggers, reactive patterns, and unconscious biases, we can better control how we react in tough situations and deal with complicated problems with more calm and objectivity. It's important to remember that regular self-reflection can be a very private and sometimes awkward process. When we face our own biases, blind spots, and growth areas, it can be humbling and even upsetting because it makes us question how we see ourselves and what we believe. But if we do this practice with confidence, humility, and a desire to grow as people, we greatly increase our chances of discovering new things about ourselves, changing, and developing a truly neutral mind. Thinking about our actions, choices, and what we think is not just something we do alone. It has big effects on our groups, our relationships, and the world around us. By becoming more self-aware and learning more about our own biases and motivations, we are better able to interact with others in a way that shows sensitivity, respect, and an open mind. As we grow, we learn how to handle tricky situations with nuance and wisdom, and how to make choices based on fairness, moral thinking, and a full understanding of different points of view. By doing this, we not only improve our own lives, but we also help make the world a more fair, just, and peaceful place to live, where differences are celebrated while our basic humanity is recognized. Lesson 6. Listen openly and without prejudice. The capacity to genuinely listen. That is, to hear and understand viewpoints that are different from our own with an open mind and without bias, has become a rare and valuable asset in our increasingly divided and politicized world. All too frequently, we enter discussions and arguments with predetermined conceptions and defensive postures, ready to defend our positions and discount or reject those that contradict our presumptions and beliefs. But in order to develop a truly impartial mindset and promote more tolerance and collaboration between many communities and beliefs, we need to master the skill of compassionate, open listening. Listening honestly and impartially fundamentally calls for a mental attitude change. We must be prepared to put aside our own goals, prejudices, and assumptions, and to approach every conversation with a sincere desire to understand and gain new knowledge. It entails putting aside the need to come up with rebuttals or counter-arguments while the other person is speaking and focusing entirely on their words, tone, and the underlying feelings and deeper meanings that underlie their viewpoints. Our innate propensity for confirmation bias, the unintentional propensity to seek out and prioritize information that confirms our pre-existing beliefs while dismissing or discounting contradictory evidence, is one of the biggest obstacles to listening in an open and non-judgmental manner. Due to this cognitive bias, we may selectively filter and interpret information by using the prism of our own assumptions, which can lead us to overlook or misinterpret important details and insights that contradict our worldviews. In order to combat this prejudice, we need to actively practice active listening. This involves making a conscious effort to fully engage with the speaker, putting aside our preconceived notions and judgments and making an effort to understand not just the speaker's words as written, but also the underlying motivations, emotions, and contextual factors that shape their perspectives. To make sure we are accurately capturing the substance of their position, we must be present in the moment, ask clarifying questions, and reflect back what we have learned. Developing a strong sense of empathy and perspective taking is another essential component of listening honestly and impartially. This entails making a conscious effort to recognize and value the distinct experiences, histories, and worldviews that shape someone else's ideas and perspectives, even when those viewpoints are very different from our own. It entails deliberately going outside of our own frame of reference in order to try and see situations and problems from the perspective of another person's world, with all of its subtleties and complexity. It is not necessary for us to accept or endorse viewpoints that go counter to our own moral standards or ethical convictions in order to cultivate empathy and perspective taking. It does, however, force us to confront those opposing points of view with an open mind, a readiness to hear and comprehend, and an understanding that even strongly held opinions and beliefs are frequently based in real-world encounters, cultural settings, and historical accounts that may be foreign or hidden from us. In order to listen honestly and impartially, we must face and overcome our own innate prejudices and tribalistic tendencies, which are the deeply rooted human tendency to identify with people who are similar to us and to regard those who are different with distrust or animosity. It is a never-ending battle, but letting go of this us versus them mindset is necessary if we are to listen to one another in a genuinely compassionate and open manner and create understanding amongst people from different backgrounds and worldviews. Practicing active and focused listening that is open and judgment-free is not a passive activity. Rather, it calls for emotional intelligence, self-awareness, and a readiness to face our own defensive responses and triggers. It is all too easy to become defensive, emotionally shut down, or close our minds when faced with viewpoints or views that contradict our firmly held beliefs. Instead of responding with animosity or disdain, we can approach these instances of cognitive dissonance with composure, curiosity, and a sincere desire to understand by strengthening our emotional resilience and self-regulation. Listening honestly and impartially is a shared duty that calls for a mutual commitment to civil discourse, sincere participation, and a readiness to establish secure and welcoming environments for the discussion of various points of view. All participants in discussions and arguments should approach them with tolerance, humility, and an understanding that each of our unique worldviews, no matter how strongly held, inevitably incomplete and limited. It's crucial to recognize that some ideologies or belief systems could be incompatible with the broader values of empathy, respect, and human dignity, as well as the concepts of open and non-judgmental listening. Open listening cannot engage with or support viewpoints that are based on hatred, prejudice, or the intentional subjugation or dehumanization of others, since they are fundamentally at odds with objectivity, understanding, and moral discourse. Nevertheless, the practice of open and non-judgmental listening can still be a potent tool for fostering greater understanding, identifying points of agreement or shared objectives, and creating opportunities for productive dialogue and possible routes toward resolution or coexistence, even in the face of seemingly intractable differences or deeply ingrained ideological divides. we may be more likely to identify the underlying anxieties, historical contexts, and deeply ingrained motivations that have shaped opposing viewpoints if we approach these divides with empathy, patience, and a sincere willingness to listen and comprehend. These insights can then be used to inform more effective strategies for bridging gaps and identifying areas of shared humanity. Listening with openness and objectivity is not only a useful practice or talent, but also a profound act of compassion and an acknowledgement of our common humanity. By adopting this perspective, we not only broaden our comprehension of the complex fabric of the human experience, but we also open doors for growth and mutual learning, as well as the development of a society that is more just, equal, and peaceful. This dedication necessitates emotional intelligence, humility, and a readiness to move outside our comfort zones and face our own prejudices and blind spots. However, the trip holds the potential to improve our lives, fortify our communities, and bring us ever nearer to the principles of impartiality, empathy, and understanding that form the foundation of a truly enlightened society. Lesson 7. Look for any logical inconsistencies or contradiction. One of the most important abilities we need to work on in order to build an impartial mindset is the capacity to recognize and address logical contradictions and inconsistencies in both our own thinking and the arguments and viewpoints we come across from other people. Numerous cognitive biases and heuristics that might mislead us, cause us to hold on to incorrect beliefs, make erroneous assumptions, and ignore obvious logical errors or contradictions that call into question the validity and coherence of our reasoning, are built into our minds. Critical thinking is the process of examining information, ideas, and arguments through the lenses of rigorous logic, empirical evidence, and sound reasoning. It is fundamental to the discipline of recognizing logical flaws and contradictions. It entails actively challenging presumptions, checking the consistency and validity of premises, and assessing the logical flow and coherence of claims or belief systems. The fallacy of self-contradiction, which occurs when a person or argument makes two or more claims that are illogical or mutually exclusive, is one of the most frequent logical errors we may come across. An argument claiming all generalizations are false, for instance, would contradict its own premise because it is a generalization. It is essential to recognize and address such contradicting claims in order to preserve one's intellectual integrity and stay out of the cognitive dissonance trap. The existence of non sequiturs, or arguments or conclusions that merely do not follow logically from the premises or evidence offered, is another type of logical inconsistency. This might take many different forms, like making broad generalizations based on a few representative examples, asserting causation without providing evidence of a clear causal relationship, or depending more on ad hominem attacks or emotive appeals than on well-reasoned arguments. Holding seemingly conflicting views or values concurrently by people or groups can also result in contradictions. For example, a person may claim to support individual liberty and freedom of choice while yet endorsing laws or beliefs that restrict societal standards or personal autonomy. To be intellectually honest and to make sure that our acts and ideas are consistent with a reasonable ethical framework, we must recognize and address these kinds of conflicts. Moreover, it is critical to be watchful for logical contradictions or inconsistencies within more comprehensive ideologies, worldviews, or belief systems. It is possible for even well-established and logically sound philosophical or political systems to have underlying contradictions or logical errors that compromise their integrity or legitimacy. We can find possible flaws or inconsistencies in these belief systems that may have gone unnoticed or were previously explained away by critically examining and analyzing them. Recognizing logical fallacies and paradoxes is not just a cerebral task. It is an essential part of developing objectivity and upholding a dedication to reality, factual data, and sound reasoning. We run the risk of succumbing to confirmation bias, rationalization, and the maintenance of incorrect or unsubstantiated views when we avoid addressing logical errors or contradictions in our own thinking, as well as in the arguments and viewpoints we come across. However, it's crucial to understand that not all seeming contradictions or inconsistencies are false or nonsensical. Sometimes, what would seem to be a contradiction is instead the product of contextual considerations, sophisticated or nuanced reasoning or communication and language barriers. Before completely discounting or rejecting an argument or point of view, it is important to approach possible contradictions with an open mind and a desire to participate in additional research, discussion, and explanation. Recognizing and resolving logical contradictions and inconsistencies is a continuous process that calls for ongoing awareness, introspection, and a readiness to confront and modify our own presumptions and beliefs. In light of new information or revelations, we must be steadfast in our resolve to constantly scrutinize our mental processes, test our presumptions, and make sure that our views and deeds are supported by reasoned arguments, solid empirical data, and a cogent ethical framework as we negotiate the complexity of our quickly evolving environment. It's also critical to recognize that the capacity to recognize logical fallacies and contradictions is a group effort that calls for courteous and open communication, a readiness for critical analysis and intellectual conversation, and a common dedication to the search for the truth and objectivity. Addressing logical fallacies and contradictions can be a difficult and sensitive process since it may force us to face deeply held convictions, treasured ideologies, or fundamental tenets of our identities and worldviews. It is imperative that we approach this task with empathy, compassion, and an understanding that our assumptions and ideas frequently fulfill significant psychological and social roles, even in the event that they turn out to be illogical or inconsistent. Lesson 8. Embrace cognitive diversity in your life. The ability to embrace cognitive diversity. The rich tapestry of varied perspectives, beliefs, and ways of thinking that exist within and across cultures, communities, and individual minds has become a crucial element of developing an impartial mindset in our increasingly globalized and interconnected world. All too frequently, we are surrounded by intellectual uniformity and echo chambers that serve to confirm our pre-existing ideas and presumptions while keeping us closed off from other perspectives and ways of thinking. But in order to be truly impartial, we must leave these cozy corners and actively search for and interact with the whole range of cognitive diversity present in the human experience. The profound and astounding truth that each and every human person is fashioned by a distinct constellation of experiences, cultural influences, genetic predispositions, and neurological wiring is the fundamental basis for cognitive diversity. Since no two minds are exactly same, there is an inherent variation in the worldviews, approaches to problem solving, and ways in which reality is perceived and interpreted that result from this. Accepting this diversity gives us a greater understanding of the depth and complexity of the human experience, as well as a wider choice of tools and viewpoints to help us deal with the difficulties and complexities of our globalized society. Embracing cognitive diversity can test our presumptions, increase our comprehension, and promote creativity and intellectual progress, among other potent advantages. Being surrounded by people who approach problems and think differently from us forces us to examine limitations of our own opinions and to consider other points of view and solutions that we may not have previously been able to see or comprehend. In addition, confirmation bias, the human propensity to look for and give priority to information that confirms our pre-existing beliefs while downplaying or rejecting contradicting evidence, can be effectively countered by cognitive diversity. We can examine our own prejudices and presumptions and remain open to changing or even giving up long-held beliefs in the face of convincing evidence or well-reasoned arguments by exposing ourselves to a diverse variety of viewpoints and modes of thought. Accepting cognitive variety also has a significant impact on how people solve problems and make decisions. Teams and groups made up of people with different backgrounds, cognitive styles, and areas of expertise are better able to tackle difficult problems from several perspectives, spot mental biases, and come up with creative solutions that might have gone unnoticed in a more uniform setting. In addition to improving the caliber and thoroughness of decision-making, this diversity of opinion can also encourage more innovation, adaptation, and resilience in the face of quickly shifting conditions. It's critical to understand that accepting cognitive diversity involves a very personal and emotional journey. In addition to being an intellectual endeavor, being exposed to viewpoints and modes of thought that radically contradict our preconceived notions and ideas can be extremely confusing and even dangerous for our sense of self and reality. It is imperative that we approach this process with humility, empathy, and a readiness to face and resolve any discomfort, cognitive dissonance, or even grief that may surface when we consider the consequences of other viewpoints. The strong pull of tribalism, the deeply rooted human propensity to forge allegiances with those who are similar to us and view those who are different with distrust or hostility, must be overcome in order to embrace cognitive diversity. This us versus them mentality can take many subtle yet harmful forms, causing us to unwittingly discount or ignore viewpoints that come from beyond our own ideological, social, or cultural circles. To overcome this prejudice, we must make a conscious effort, reflect on our own beliefs, and be open to question our preconceived notions of what or who defines us and them. It's also critical to understand that accepting cognitive diversity does not entail letting go of our own principles, convictions, or ideals. Instead, it involves approaching different viewpoints with an open mind, a readiness to understand and learn, and the realization that even deeply held worldviews and belief systems can contain insightful information or truth nuggets that can deepen our own understanding or point out areas where we are thinking blindly. Moreover, accepting cognitive diversity calls on us to continuously seek out and interact with different points of view, both locally and globally. It is not a passive attempt, but an active, intentional activity. This can entail actively seeking out diverse information and media sources, going after educational or travel opportunities that introduce us to new cultures and ways of thinking, or just making a deliberate effort to politely converse and engage in intellectual exchange with people whose backgrounds and beliefs differ from our own. It's crucial to recognize, nevertheless, that not all viewpoints or belief systems are intrinsically worthy of respect or acceptance. Under the guise of cognitive diversity, ideologies or worldviews that are based on bigotry, hatred, or the intentional oppression or dehumanization of others cannot be accepted or engaged with, because they fundamentally contradict the values of impartiality, empathy, and respect for human dignity that form the foundation of this practice. Nevertheless, the practice of embracing cognitive diversity can still be a potent tool for fostering greater understanding, identifying points of agreement or shared objectives, and creating opportunities for productive dialogue and possible routes toward resolution or coexistence, even in the face of seemingly intractable ideological divides or deeply ingrained conflicts. We may be more likely to find opportunities for mutual learning, growth, and the development of a more just, equitable, and peaceful society if we approach these divides with empathy, patience, and a sincere willingness to understand the underlying perspectives, fears, and historical contexts that have shaped opposing worldviews. Lesson 9. Separate your feelings from your decisions and judgments. Another challenge to developing an impartial mindset is the pervasive impact of emotions on our judgments and decision-making processes. Since our thoughts, perceptions, and behaviors are intricately entwined with the complex web of emotions, moods, and gut instincts that create our interior experiences, humans are fundamentally emotional creatures. This emotional complexity is an essential part of what makes us human, but it can also mislead us, impairing our judgment and forcing us to make decisions based on fleeting emotions rather than reasoned arguments. Verifiable facts and a thorough analysis of all pertinent information. The development of self-awareness and emotional intelligence is fundamental to the capacity to disentangle our emotions from our judgments and choices. This entails becoming more aware of our own emotional landscape, realizing the intricate interactions that exist between our ideas, emotions, and bodily sensations, and strengthening our ability to objectively and clearly examine and categorize our emotional experiences. We may accept our emotions without being overpowered or overly influenced by them when we bring them into consciousness. The propensity for cognitive errors and skewed reasoning is one of the biggest risks associated with letting our emotions control our actions and judgments. Strong emotional states such as rage, fear, jealousy, or ecstasy can distort our perceptions and mental processes. As a result, we may ignore or disregard crucial information, draw broad conclusions, or think in binary terms that oversimplify complex situations. Moreover, our feelings may influence us to put impulse or instant gratification ahead of long-term effects and reasoned thought. When our emotional states change, we could make decisions based on fleeting impulses that we later come to regret. Conversely, instead of analyzing the data and logic supporting our opinions objectively, we could hold fast to opinions or views that are motivated by strong feelings of attachment or aversion. We need to intentionally practice keeping our emotions apart from our judgments and decision-making processes in order to combat these inclinations. In order to do this, we must deliberately stop and distance ourselves from our emotional responses, establishing a mental and emotional safety zone between our current emotions and the thought processes required to evaluate the facts, consider our options, and draw conclusions. Practicing mindfulness and present moment awareness is a potent method for distancing emotions from judgments and decisions. By teaching our minds to stay in the present moment and observe our thoughts and feelings with a detached curiosity, rather than getting sucked into them, we clear the mental space required to conduct more unbiased and objective analysis. Seeking out outside viewpoints and input from reliable people who can offer a more emotionally detached perspective on our decision-making and mental processes can also be quite helpful. We provide ourselves with opportunity to discover any emotional blind spots or biases that might be impairing our judgment by allowing people to question our assumptions and critically examine our logic. It's also critical to understand that keeping our emotions apart from our judgments and conclusions does not entail completely repressing or denying our emotions. Emotions are a fundamental aspect of the human experience, and they frequently offer insightful observations, gut feelings, and intuitions that are important to take into account while making decisions. The secret is to strike a healthy balance in which we let our feelings guide and deepen our comprehension without letting them take over or unduly influence our decisions and judgments. In addition, it's critical to recognize that there are circumstances in which our feelings can legitimately and validly influence the decisions we make. For example, it would be improper and even destructive to try to fully remove our emotions from the equation when dealing with extremely personal or ethical challenges that touch on our core values and principles. In these situations, the objective is to intentionally and self-awarely interact with our emotions, letting them lead but also holding them up to the light of reason and unbiased examination. Furthermore, keeping our emotions apart from our judgments and decisions is a continuous process that calls for continued self-reflection, constant awareness, and a readiness to face and resolve our defensive responses and emotional triggers. It is inevitable that we will come across circumstances that cause strong emotional reactions as we traverse the complexities and difficulties of life. It is our duty to retain the mental and emotional self-control to stop, take a step back, and use our objective, logical faculties before letting those emotions unduly affect our decisions and assessments. We need to understand that being able to disentangle our feelings from our judgments and decisions is a group effort rather than just an individual one. It calls for courteous and open communication, a readiness for rigorous intellectual discussion, and a common dedication to the pursuit of truth, objectivity, and moral reasoning. We cultivate an atmosphere that is favorable to developing impartial mindset and sound judgment by providing areas where emotions can be acknowledged and processed while still placing a high value on reasoned discussion and evidence-based decision-making. It is ultimately about finding a delicate balance where we honor the richness and depth of our emotional experiences while simultaneously maintaining the mental clarity and impartiality necessary to navigate the complexities of our interconnected world with wisdom, compassion, and sound reasoning. This practice of separating our emotions from our decisions and judgments is not about denying or suppressing our inherent humanity. It's a path that necessitates emotional intelligence, self-awareness, and a readiness to face the complex, sometimes painful interaction between our thoughts and feelings. However, it's a route that promises to improve our lives, fortify our bonds with one another, and give us the wisdom to make choices and decisions based on the facts, compassion, and a profound regard for the inherent dignity and value of every human being. The involvement of cognitive biases and heuristics, or the mental shortcuts and patterns of deviation from rational thinking that can lead us wrong, is an important aspect of separating emotions from decisions and judgments that warrants additional investigation. We become more prone to biases like the availability heuristic I, the confirmation bias, and the anchoring bias when we let our emotions rule us. We can detect and lessen these cognitive biases by practicing emotional detachment and impartiality in our decision-making processes, which results in more objective and well-reasoned decisions. It's also critical to acknowledge the significant influence that distancing emotions from judgments and decisions can have on our interpersonal interactions and relationships. Instead of attempting to find common ground or understanding, we are more prone to become defensive, pass judgment on people unfairly, and inflame tensions when we approach disagreements or conflicts from an emotional, reactive position. But when we can take our emotions out of the equation, we are better able to have civil conversations, try to see things from other people's angles, and work together to develop solutions that respect the variety of experiences and points of view that exist within our communities and civilizations. In the end, learning to keep our emotions apart from our judgments and decisions is not a solution to all of life's problems. Nor is it a call to give up on our innate emotionality or the depth of our experiences. Instead, it is a potent instrument, a lens that allows us to acknowledge the complexity and depth of our inner selves while viewing the world with more clarity, wisdom, and objectivity. It's a path of self-awareness, emotional intelligence, and a dedication to lifelong learning and development. And it is a path that holds the potential to improve not only our own lives, but also the world by fostering a more equitable, compassionate, and peaceful society in which all viewpoints are valued, rational discussion, and moral judgment serve as the cornerstone of our group activities. And each person's inherent worth and dignity are acknowledged and respected. Adopting this practice brings us closer to the principles of impartiality, wisdom, and enlightenment that have led the greatest thinkers and visionaries of humankind throughout history, and helps us realize our fullest potential as people and as a species. Final lesson: impartial mindset. The process of developing an impartial mindset calls for consistent work, introspection, and a strong dedication to personal development. We have examined a number of techniques and ideas in this book that can assist us in overcoming our prejudices, presumptions, and emotional attachments in order to view the world more objectively, empathetically, and wisely. We now understand how critical it is to recognize and own our cognitive biases in order to reduce their impact on our judgments and ideas. We have studied empathy and perspective, attempting to comprehend and value points of view that may be very different from our own. We have struggled to keep our feelings apart from our decisions and assessments, realizing the significant influence that emotions can have on our capacity for objectivity. Most importantly, we have faced the need to accept cognitive variety, go beyond our comfort zones, and interact with the diverse range of ideas, perspectives, and modes of thought that are inherent to the human experience. We can only really expand our awareness and get over the confines of our own frames of reference if we are receptive to different points of view. During our trip, we have grappled with the intricacies and nuances that arise when we seek for true impartiality, as well as our own presumptions. We have also experienced uncomfortable times and cognitive dissonance. However, in the process, we have also developed priceless traits like emotional intelligence, humility, resilience, and a profound respect for the inherent value and dignity of every human being. As we proceed, let us keep in mind that developing an impartial mentality is a continuous process of learning, development, and self-discovery, rather than a goal to be achieved. We will occasionally make mistakes due to our prejudices and emotional ties, which could cause us to go wrong. However, we may continue to hone and strengthen our ability for objective thought and judgment by being watchful, always putting the ideas and methods we have studied into practice, surrounding ourselves with a community of like-minded people, and remaining surrounded by a diversity of viewpoints.